Hello, my name is Sarah Goldberg. If you're watching this, you probably know me. And I am mentally ill. This GoFundMe has been up for like a month. I meant to make this video quite a while ago. However, executive dysfunction. And so I'm doing it now. The shortest possible way that I can explain the reason I need help, and to this high of a number, which actually got subtracted 5K because my therapist is great, is that I have been fighting my entire life. I was kind of a teenage runaway when I was 15, fighting to get to a better future, and I had just so much undiagnosed and misdiagnosed physical and mental health stuff. I have a rare autoimmune disorder called Behçet's that I only finally found a rheumatologist, which I've been sick. I'm 30. I've been sick with it since I was 13. Only in the last year have I found a rheumatologist who, unfortunately, Behçet's is a diagnosis of exclusion, meaning there's no test for it. You just rule it out. And so before Dr. Burkham, every doctor told me how lucky I was to be healthy. And my mental health is the same, where the only mental health diagnosis I had was bipolar 2. We are just covering therapy now that might actually be a misdiagnosis, which is truly shocking. Truly shocking meaning it actually is. But I was not actually diagnosed with ADHD until this last year, because unfortunately we don't see it in gifted women, even when they are the most ADHD humans to exist. Hello. But the other thing that I actually knew I had, I just didn't know the full extent of what it meant, was CPTSD, which is complex PTSD, which is not actually recognized in a DSM-5, but it should be. So when people think of PTSD, they think of, one big event, something in a war zone, a rape, etc. CPTSD, on the other hand, complex PTSD, is about children growing up in unsafe situations and a long-term surviving, thinking there's no escape out of the unsafe situation. And I knew my childhood wasn't good, but I kind of ran away at 15. I have almost no connections to who I was under that age. I barely talk with my family of origin, but I have truly incredible, amazing family by choice, who have saved my life over and over. And my joke was my life was average, because it averages out, because there is extremely bad things, but some extremely good things. And what I've learned from this last few years is that you can't run away from the kind of childhood I had. I wouldn't even let myself think down my childhood memories, because it's not that everything was bad. There was happy things, but those happy things are pretty ruined now. And I didn't realize that I was repeating patterns that happened to little kid me, because humans are just the stories we tell ourselves, and the stories we tell ourselves when we are developing really matter. And a lot of times PTSD can get activated by traumas, by resulting traumas. When I ran away at 15, I didn't actually run away. Like, I went to school 50 miles away, but I didn't have a car. The bus stop was 15 miles away. I was just, within the first week, I was sleeping on friends' couches, like 2 to 3 days of the week. So, that's what I mean by that. It meant, though, that I completely knew how to couch hop by the time I was 21, and now suddenly truly had no contact with my parents, and was at UC Santa Cruz and just trying to make by. And I have had 3 big traumatic instances that have caused me to collapse and then caused me to fight. And each one has been like one exponent worse than the other. The first one was when I was 13, when I got hit with my autoimmune stuff and also my depression, and it's when there's a second neuroplasticity stage, one for people with ADHD. They're about to amend the DSM for this, have their ADHD turn on as teenagers. But almost all those people had like some criteria of ADHD before, and that was me. I went from being able to hyper focus and loving school to now it's taking like 5 hours to do homework. It should take 20 minutes. And I escaped that first time when I was 15 to go to the high school. And if I had had proper therapy then, I could have had a much better life. Unfortunately, I did not. And my entire adult life, I've been going to therapists. It's just no one understood my brain because needed somebody ADHD themselves, needed someone who could follow the tangents, and because I didn't talk about my childhood. I would talk about like being a teenager, but I wouldn't talk about under 12 because my brain doesn't go there. And so then my second collapse, it's always that like there's a trauma and then I hold up as best as I can, and then the stories I told myself, the coping mechanisms to get through the trauma and to being maladaptive the next year. So like 13 was a bad year, but 14 was a true collapse, and then I fought at 15. And when I was 21, the traumas are always illness. The first time was my illness. The second time was my mother's illness. Was when my mother, who is bipolar 1, had a manic psychotic episode for a year straight, right when I transferred to UC Santa Cruz and completely lost my ability to pass classes, and it was very bad. And then 22, the year afterwards, was before the worst year of my life because of the ways things collapsed. And then I fought and returned to UCSC and kind of barely passed classes. And then the third collapse, the third illness was COVID. And I handled 2020 better than most people I know, but like the coping skills to get me through all became so maladaptive in 2021 and the beginning of 2022. And the thing about collapses like that is that it's proof it's CPTSD, not a personality disorder, because a personality disorder would be my entire life. I would be acting in these dramatic, disorganized, unfunctioning ways. But each one is an exponent worse because it hits all the other existing trauma. And the therapist I'd had for 3 years, Laura, I knew she didn't get me, and I was really completely relying on my emotionally intelligent friends to support me through the last year and a half of how really bad my brain got. But I didn't realize Laura was actually literally making me worse, because she would hear me say, I logically understand whatever, I just could not stop obsessing and hyperfixating, which is an ADHD thing, on better futures. Which some of that was like in 2020, I got really obsessed with moving to Maine, but a lot of it started being about like potential loves in my life. And then, being men who I had just like some degree of chemistry with, but then I would go crazy imagining the future, and I was fully aware. I was just a John Mulaney quote of like, you think I don't know what I'm doing? I also don't want to be doing what I'm doing right now. But I couldn't stop it. And it was just getting worse and worse and worse. I also was, I was living alone in quarantine. Some of the worst parts of my psyche breaking in like December and January of like 2021, 2022. I was completely alone, which was not great. I lost a really scary amount of weight. It's at least stabilized the last few months, but I am about 15 pounds under where I would like to be. I was really scared for a few months there that I was a few months from a feeding tube, but I was also thankful that I'm not going to die from this. I'm not going to die. I've just been in a state of crisis. And my therapist, Laura, was making it worse by hearing me say I logically understood that it was toxic. I was obsessing over whoever. And then she would keep saying like, oh, that's so wonderful, you understand that, and so you're going to be okay because you're so smart and resilient, as I kept getting worse and worse. And I was in this cycle where she would ask what physical doctors said about my weight loss, and they all said, what does your therapist say? The answer is it's psychosomatic. The answer is that it is the external manifestation of what internally has been happening. And my metaphor was trauma Sarah. Logic Sarah is stronger than trauma Sarah. And I did not realize that trauma Sarah wasn't just like one traumatic response. Trauma Sarah was a variety of broken little girls of my psyche accessing shit that had happened to me, like coping skills that I had gained as a kid. The most maladaptive one currently is, at some point in the last year, this narrow pathway, this I hate myself turned on. I definitely didn't used to think this all the time. I think that it's really young. I think it's from times I was abused and being told I was worthless and horrible, because if you hate yourself, you can't, no one else can touch you, you know? So it was protection from little kid me, for little kid me. It's dissociation. But it's emotional flashbacks. It is me feeling what I felt then as a little kid, what I needed to feel to protect myself. And now, as a 30-year-old, I don't need to think a thought. I hate myself 100 times a day with that level of self-hatred, which hits me basically when I'm seeing the stuff I have to deal with and not knowing what to start with, and thinking about rejection, thinking that I've bothered people. I've been trying to get this GoFundMe funded. It did well at first, and it's been stalling, and it's really, really demoralizing and disheartening having to ask people for help and feeling. I completely understand, because this happened in my last collapse, and this collapse is way worse, that like a lot of people need space from me right now, because I've not been okay. And some of those people might be forever. Some of them are temporary. Some of them I hope are temporary. And I've needed so much help that it's getting to the end. And I get that. I really, really get that. But I was told by someone I trusted, I mean, really, twice in a few months I was told that I needed professional help, and I didn't disagree. I knew how, like, not okay I was. I just, at the time, it was, like, talks about psych holds, and I just knew that, like, 5150 isn't, because I was like, I'm fully aware of how terrible I'm being, of how crazy I'm acting. I remember there was this moment in March where I was like, wow, I've gone crazy, because my mood was just, like, my mood fluctuates, but not usually the way it was then, which was, like, throughout the day I was going from, like, deeply positive and energetic about the future to, like, deep suicidal ideation, and I'm just like, what is happening? And what was happening is that, like, for any kind of intrusive thought, if you just ignore it and say it's bad, it gets stronger. And logic error is stronger than trauma error is the sentence I needed to get to the right professionals, but that's also the sentence that was making me worse and worse and worse, because trauma error was a lot of traumas, and was breaking my psyche. And I have been so scared of going manic, because my mother went manic for a year, and I didn't consider, what if I'm on the edge of dissociation of, I mean, I actually dissociate all the time, but what if there's some, like, theories out there that, like, dissociative identity disorder isn't real, that, like, psychiatrists cause it, and I definitely was kind of on that side, and, oh, okay, never mind. And I don't have dissociative identity disorder. I'm not that bad. If I was that bad, I would know what was happening. I don't lose time or anything. It is just that I keep having these responses and thought patterns that are, like, traumatized little girls. And then I'm like, you know, just things like, there's so many people I love right now who need space. Knowing that, like, someone who I love more than the world, who, like, I've overwhelmed, who needs space right now, that, like, knowing that, like, we are overly securely attached, that, like, we're gonna be okay, but the terrified little girl part of me being like, I hurt them, I hurt them, I'm bad, am I gonna lose them forever? And the way out of this is to mother yourself, with intensive therapy. And so I was told that I needed professional help, and I found it. The thing about ADHD is that it's a elaborate defense mechanism, and hyperfixations are escapes from the current moment. And the current moment is this box hell that I can't deal with, and needing to figure out I have so many positive leads for the future, but needing to figure everything out and not knowing how to start. And, I always feel like once I'm given structure that I do well, but I need to be able to get it to do that. This is rambly, but I accept that because I have ADHD. But when I was told I needed professional help, I tried two things. I tried to go to an inpatient peer run program, and I lasted 4 hours there because, one, the people there weren't my peers, but even if they had been, it wasn't professional help. And I reached out to a friend who runs a clinic that I know specializes in like ADHD and queerness and polyamory and stuff. I just never thought of this before because I'm broke and I have a therapist through Medi-Cal, and also she's my friend, she can't be my therapist. But she had posted up an article about that she wrote about, is it an insecure attachment or an ADHD hyperfixation on romance? And my therapist Laura didn't understand ADHD much, so she didn't really understand hyperfixations, but she had correctly identified that I have due to my trauma, I have insecure attachments with people. I'm very anxiously attached to people. And I went, ha 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 ha, what about when it's both though? And then she posted up an article like a week later about, what about if you have an insecure attachment and you have an ADHD hyperfixation on romance? And I was like, this is directly the hell that is my current brain. So I reached out to that friend, asking her if there was other people in the clinic I could see. I was going to interview 4 people, and the first person who called me was Ray, and we were both so excited and down. It turns out she co-wrote those articles, like, before I mentioned I also was getting ketamine treatment, which she's the only one in the clinic who has training on. So, and she was able to get my brain, point out it was proto-dissociative, get me to sanity, she told me finding a therapist is like finding a soulmate. And I mean, I've been trying to find the right medical team my whole life. And the thing is, I have truly so much work to do. Like, I have 30 years of trauma to unpack because I've never yet had a good therapist. And the system she uses, internal familiar systems, connects like everything you're currently going through with like, how does that relate to you under 12? Which is what I need because my brain on its own doesn't want to ever go to under 12. But right now I'm in what she calls the most painful part of it, which is the part where I've been working so hard on this that I now see my trauma responses everywhere. I'm now kind of like identifying what the different trauma responses are. Like, okay, how old was I when like that specific thing came up? Like, yada yada. And really realizing how bad my childhood was, which is honestly, it was worse than I realized. And it's really painful. It's really painful and hard. Especially when, I still also have all this to deal with. And Ray is amazing and is currently seeing me for 4 days a week and is currently giving me her sliding scale rate. I also really need to start working with an executive dysfunction coach that I have in a clinic. I worked with her once and then I was like, because I don't really know how to function. But I might end up needing to deal with her like 4 to 5 days a week. I don't know. And then I want to get ketamine treatments because I have tried so many things for my depression, and nothing has worked. And ketamine is amazing for treatment-resistant depression. I know it has a lot of bias against it as a street drug, but when used in a therapeutic setting, it's the fastest acting antidepressant. It works for 70% of people with treatment-resistant depression. And I was one of my best friends' ride for their ketamine sessions. I was able to be like part of it, like in the session once, and it was a miracle. But I can't actually start that till I know how it's going to be fun. You have to be like very internally like at peace and ready to like accept becoming the new you, which I kind of can't be when I'm in this state of, and I've been in a state of crisis for like, you know, a year, the Biden administration, but this is like such a frustrating part of it because I really am almost to better. I mean, I'm going to be doing this work forever, but for at least a decade, but I have good leads on future like career jobs. I have the right medical team, like, but what I am struggling with is how to afford it. I have been too ill to work consistently. The work I'm doing is this. The work I'm doing is my brain really analyzing everything she's saying. We do sessions at point 4 days a week, and because I have very bad working memory, because ADHD, because they're on Zoom, I record them, but obviously with my therapist's consent, and I rewatch them, because that way it just helps me to process things, and to like maybe things I missed because I was too activated at the time, I can just like go over and process. It's all, I can also like look at older sessions and kind of like see where I've progressed. Like it's super, super, super helpful. And that's the work I've been doing. But I need to be able to pay for it. And unfortunately, these things that help are not covered by Medi-Cal. That's why I got worse, is because Laura was a Medi-Cal covered therapist. Medi-Cal covers some of my stuff. My psychiatrist and my meds are through Medi-Cal. You know, my rheumatologist is through Medi-Cal. I'm not completely screwed on that end, but I just needed a therapist who specialized in ADHD and CPTSD, and I found it. And now I just have to pay for it. And so that's why I'm here. This video is rambling, but thank you for watching. Any amount helps. I know the scary thing about having like a number this big is that human psychology wise, people don't want to like donate if they don't think it's gonna succeed, but you know, any amount is like one more session paid for, and some more visibility. So yeah, regardless, thank you for watching if you have watched all this, and I hope you have a great day. Okay, bye.